She replaced her ill father as the driver, but the rich CEO never expected to fall in love. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready. Let's start. The fluorescent lights of Chicago General Hospital buzzed overhead as Keisha Williams stared at the discharge papers in her trembling hands. 48 hours. That's how long she had to figure out how to save her father's life and their family's future. Miss Williams, Dr. Rodriguez touched her shoulder gently. Your father's diabetes has progressed faster than we anticipated. The retinopathy is affecting his vision significantly. He cannot drive professionally anymore. Keisha looked through the glass partition at Marcus Williams, her 60-year-old father, sitting on the hospital bed looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. For 15 years, he'd been the personal driver for Chicago's elite, building a reputation for discretion and reliability. Without this job, there would be no insurance, no money for his insulin, no way to afford the treatments that kept him alive. Oh, how long does he have? Keisha asked, though she dreaded the answer. With proper treatment and medication, years. Without it, Dr. Rodriguez didn't need to finish. Walking into her father's room, Keisha forced a smile. Ready to go home, Dad? Marcus looked up, his eyes clouded but still sharp with intelligence. Baby girl, I need to tell you something. Adrian Blackwood called this morning. He needs a driver tomorrow, and if I don't show up, you're not driving anywhere, Keisha interrupted firmly. As a trauma nurse, she'd seen too many accidents caused by impaired vision. Then I lose my job. And without the job, he didn't finish, but they both knew. The Blackwood account was his only client now, and Adrian Blackwood was notoriously demanding about reliability. That evening, in their small apartment in Pilsen, Keisha stared at her father's chauffeur uniform hanging in the closet. An impossible idea began forming in her mind. She had her commercial driver's license from her days driving ambulances through nursing school. She knew the routes around Chicago like the back of her hand, but could she really pull this off? Dad, she said slowly, what if you had a substitute? Just temporarily until you're better. Marcus looked skeptical. Adrian doesn't like changes. He's particular. What if you told him you had a niece who could fill in, someone with professional driving experience? Keisha, he'd know you're not... My niece, she interrupted. Not your daughter. Someone more distant, less emotionally complicated for him to hire. Marcus studied his daughter's determined face. Keisha had inherited her mother's stubborn streak and her fierce, protective instincts. When she set her mind to something, hurricane-force winds couldn't stop her. You'd have to convince him to keep you on, Marcus warned. Adrian Blackwood is brilliant, suspicious, and he doesn't suffer fools. One mistake and then I won't make any mistakes. The next morning, Keisha stood beside the gleaming black Mercedes sedan outside the Blackwood Tower, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd borrowed a professional suit from her friend Carmen, styled her hair in a neat bun, and practiced her professional driver demeanor in the mirror until her face hurt from forced neutrality. At exactly 6:45 a.m., the building's glass doors opened and Adrian Blackwood emerged. Keisha's breath caught. She'd seen photos in Forbes and the Chicago Tribune, but they hadn't captured the sheer presence of the man. Tall and lean, with dark hair and piercing green eyes, he moved with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Everything about him screamed power, control, and money. He stopped abruptly when he saw her. You're not Marcus. Keisha stepped forward. Grateful, her voice came out steady. Keisha Williams, sir. Temporary substitute while my uncle recovers from his medical procedure. Adrian's eyes swept over her from head to toe, not in an inappropriate way, but with the calculating assessment of someone who missed nothing. Marcus didn't mention he had a niece. He's private about family matters, Keisha replied smoothly. I have 5 years, experience driving emergency vehicles. I assure you, your schedule will be less stressful than trauma calls. Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Amusement? Intrigue? Emergency vehicles, ambulances, primarily fast, efficient, and I've never lost a patient to traffic delays. Adrian moved closer, and Keisha caught a hint of expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely masculine. Marcus has been my driver for 15 years. He knows my routes, my preferences, Your coffee order is a double espresso with a dash of cinnamon from Romano's on Michigan Avenue, Keisha interrupted, hoping her quick research would pay off. You prefer classical music before 9 a.m., take calls only on hands-free, and you have a board meeting at 8:30 that cannot be delayed. Adrian's eyebrows rose slightly. Impressive homework. I don't take jobs I'm not prepared for, Mr. Blackwood. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Keisha felt electricity crackling in the air between them, though she couldn't quite identify what it was. Challenge. Interest. Something more dangerous. Finally, Adrian opened the rear door and slid inside. Let's see if you drive as confidently as you talk, Miss Williams. As Keisha settled behind the wheel, she caught Adrian's eyes in the rearview mirror. Green eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed facade. Just so we're clear, Adrian said, his voice low and slightly amused, I don't believe for a second that this arrangement is as simple as you're making it seem. Keisha's pulse spiked, but she kept her voice level. I'm not sure what you mean, sir. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his face appearing in the rearview mirror with unsettling intensity. What I mean, Miss Williams, is that in my experience, when something seems too convenient to be true, it usually is. As Keisha pulled into Chicago traffic, she realized that fooling Adrian Blackwood was going to be far more complicated than she'd imagined. The man in her back seat wasn't just wealthy and demanding, he was dangerously perceptive, and despite every logical reason to keep things strictly professional, she couldn't shake the feeling that the next few weeks were going to change everything. 3 days into her masquerade, Keisha was beginning to understand why her father had worked for Adrian Blackwood for 15 years. Despite his intimidating reputation, Adrian was surprisingly human. Take Lakeshore Drive, Adrian instructed as they left his penthouse that Tuesday morning. I want to see the water. It wasn't the most efficient route to his downtown office, but Keisha had learned that Adrian sometimes needed these moments of calm before diving into his day. She'd noticed the subtle signs, the way his jaw tightened when his phone buzzed with certain names, how his breathing changed when James Morrison, his assistant, called with urgent matters. Rough night? Keisha asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. In the rearview mirror, she saw Adrian's surprised expression. What makes you say that? You asked for the scenic route. In my experience, people do that when they need a few extra minutes to face whatever's waiting for them. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Marcus never asked personal questions. I'm not Marcus, Keisha replied, then held her breath. Had she crossed a line? No, Adrian said thoughtfully. You're definitely not. They drove in comfortable silence along the lake, the morning sun casting golden reflections on the water. Keisha found herself stealing glances at Adrian in the mirror. He'd loosened his tie slightly and was staring out at Lake Michigan with an expression she couldn't quite read. My father died 6 months ago, Adrian said suddenly. Keisha's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I'm sorry. Everyone expects me to fill his shoes perfectly. Same decisions, same ruthless business practices, same... He trailed off. Sorry, you didn't sign up to be my therapist. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who's not invested in your life, Keisha offered gently. Occupational hazard of the job. Which job? Driving or emergency medicine? Keisha's heart skipped. Had she said too much? I worked with a lot of people in crisis situations. You'd learn to listen. Adrian leaned forward, bringing his face closer to the partition between them. Tell me about the emergency medicine work. Think fast, Keisha. EMT training. You see people at their worst moments. Learn to read stress signals. It wasn't entirely a lie. Her nursing background had taught her exactly that. Interesting, Adrian murmured. And what stress signals are you reading from me right now? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Keisha met his eyes in the rearview mirror, and for a moment, The space between them felt charged with something electric. Insomnia, she said finally. Anxiety about living up to expectations. And, she hesitated, and loneliness. The word dropped between them like a stone in still water. Adrian's expression shifted, becoming unreadable. You're very perceptive, Miss Williams. Like I said, occupational hazard. They'd reached Adrian's building, but he made no move to get out. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you really doing this job? A woman with your insights could probably make more money doing something else. Keisha's throat tightened. Because my father is dying, and this is the only way I can save him. Because I'm terrified and desperate and lying to the one person who's been kind to me in weeks. Family obligations, she said instead. Adrian nodded slowly. Family, yes, I understand those. As he stepped out of the car, he paused by her window. Keisha, her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Yes, sir. Thank you for listening. After he disappeared into the building, Keisha sat in the driver's seat, her hands trembling slightly. She was in dangerous territory. Adrian Blackwood wasn't just her father's employer. He was becoming someone she genuinely cared about, and that was the last thing she could afford. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carmen, her best friend and fellow nurse. How's the chauffeur gig? Driving any billionaire bachelors around? If only Carmen knew how complicated that question was. Just trying to keep my head down and do the job, Keisha texted back. Another message popped up. Girl, your dad called the hospital looking for you. Said Adrian Blackwood specifically requested you drive him to some charity thing tonight. Sounds like you're making an impression. Keisha's stomach fluttered with equal parts excitement and terror. Adrian had requested her specifically. That could be very good or very dangerous. That evening, Keisha waited outside Adrian's penthouse in formal driver attire, a crisp white shirt, black slacks, and her hair pulled back in a professional style that made her look older and more severe than her 28 years. Adrian emerged wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than her annual salary. He looked devastatingly handsome, and Keisha had to remind herself to breathe normally. The Palmer House, Adrian said as he settled into the back seat. The Children's Hospital fundraiser. Yes, sir. As they navigated evening traffic, Adrian surprised her by asking, Do you ever get tired of being professional all the time? What do you mean? You never seem to relax. Even when we're talking, there's this wall around you. Keisha's pulse quickened. I take my job seriously, Mr. Blackwood. Adrian, he corrected. And I'm not talking about your job. I'm talking about you. In the rearview mirror, their eyes met again. This time, the intensity in his gaze made her stomach do a little flip. I don't think you know me well enough to make that assessment, Keisha said carefully. Maybe not, but I'd like to. The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Keisha's heart race. She was playing with fire, and they both knew it. Mr. Blackwood, Adrian, she corrected, his name feeling strange and intimate on her tongue. I think it's best if we keep things professional. Of course, Adrian agreed, but something in his tone suggested the conversation was far from over. Though I have to say, Miss Williams, you're making that increasingly difficult. As they pulled up to the Palmer house, Keisha realized that her carefully constructed plan was beginning to unravel. She'd expected to remain invisible, to simply do the job and collect the paycheck. She hadn't expected Adrian Blackwood to see her, and she definitely hadn't expected to start falling for him. The charity gala was supposed to be routine. 3 hours of waiting while Adrian networked with Chicago's elite, then a quiet drive home. Instead, Keisha found herself standing in the Palmer House lobby at 10:30 p.m., watching Adrian storm toward her with a thunderous expression. "We're leaving now," he said tersely, his jaw clenched tight. Keisha didn't ask questions. She'd learned to read his moods, and this one screamed barely controlled fury. She followed him to the car, noting the way other guests stepped aside as he passed, the whispered conversations that started in his wake. Once they were safely inside the Mercedes, Adrian slumped against the leather seat and closed his eyes. Just drive. Anywhere. For 20 minutes, they cruised through downtown Chicago in silence. Finally, Adrian spoke. Do you know what it's like to have people smile to your face while plotting to destroy everything your family built? Keisha glanced in the rearview mirror. Adrian's usual composed mask had slipped, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. Ah, what happened in there? Richard Sterling, he was my father's business partner for 20 years, just informed the entire charity board that he's filing a lawsuit. Claims my father made some shady deals before he died, and that I'm either complicit or incompetent. Adrian's laugh was bitter. Maybe both. Keisha felt a surge of protective anger that surprised her. What kind of lawsuit? The kind that could destroy Blackwood Industries. The kind that makes headlines and ruins reputations. Adrian rubbed his temples. The worst part is, I'm not even sure he's wrong. What do you mean? Adrian was quiet for so long that Keisha thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. My father was brilliant, but he played by his own rules. There are deals in our files that I can't fully explain. Contracts that seem questionable. I've been trying to untangle it all for months. Have you talked to anyone about this? A lawyer? Someone you trust? Trust? Adrian laughed harshly. In my world, trust is a luxury I can't afford. Everyone wants something. Money, connections, power. Even the people closest to me have agendas. Keisha pulled into a parking spot overlooking the lake. Without thinking, she turned around to face him directly. Not everyone. Adrian's eyes met hers, and something electric passed between them. How can you be so sure? Because I know what it looks like when someone genuinely cares about you, and I know what it looks like when they don't. And which am I? The question hung in the air, loaded with dangerous implications. Keisha knew she should deflect, should maintain her professional distance. Instead, she found herself saying, You're someone who deserves people in his corner, real people, not just those who want something from you. Adrian leaned forward, eliminating the space between the front and back seats. And are you in my corner, Keisha? Her name on his lips sent warmth flooding through her chest. She struggled to find words that wouldn't completely destroy her cover story. I think you're a good man dealing with an impossible situation, even though you barely know me. Sometimes you can tell more about a person in a few conversations than others learn in years. Adrian's hand moved toward the partition, his fingers nearly touching the space where hers rested. What can you tell about me? Keisha's breathing shallow as she studied his face, the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the way his usually perfect hair had been mussed by his frustration, the vulnerability in his green eyes that he was trying so hard to hide. I can tell that you care more than you let people see, that you're afraid of letting people down, that you put enormous pressure on yourself to be perfect because you don't think you're worthy of the legacy you inherited. Adrian's expression shifted, becoming intense in a way that made Keisha's pulse race. And what can you tell about yourself? What do you mean? Can you tell that you're beautiful, that you're the first person in months who's talked to me like I'm human instead of a business opportunity? That every day I look forward to our conversations more than anything else on my schedule? Keisha's breath caught. This was dangerous territory, far beyond anything she'd prepared for. Adrian, I know this is inappropriate, he said quickly. I know you work for me, and there are boundaries, but I can't stop thinking about you. About this. He gestured between them. Whatever this is, you don't know me, Keisha whispered, hating the truth of it. And then let me learn. Adrian's hand moved to touch hers through the partition, and the contact sent electricity shooting up her arm. For a moment, Keisha allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to tell him the truth about her father, about her real job, about the desperate circumstances that had brought her into his life. Then reality crashed back. She was living a lie, and every moment she spent getting closer to Adrian made the eventual discovery more devastating. We should get you home, she said, pulling her hand away despite every instinct screaming at her to move closer. Adrian studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Of course, you're right. But as Keisha drove him back to his penthouse, she could feel his eyes on her in the rearview mirror, and she knew that something fundamental had shifted between them. The professional boundaries she'd worked so hard to maintain were crumbling, and she had no idea how to stop it. When they reached his building, Adrian paused before getting out. Keisha. Yes. Whatever happens with this lawsuit, with my company, thank you, for tonight, for listening. It's what anyone would do. No, Adrian said firmly. It's what you would do. And that makes all the difference. As Keisha watched him disappear into his building, she realized she was in serious trouble. She'd started this job to save her father's life, but somewhere along the way, she'd begun to care about saving Adrian too. The problem was, she couldn't save them both without destroying herself in the process. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. How did tonight go? Adrian called to say you handled a difficult situation perfectly. He specifically requested you for the rest of the week. Keisha stared at the message, her heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. Adrian trusted her. He wanted her around. He just didn't know that everything about her was a lie. Chicago weather was notoriously unpredictable, but the storm that hit Thursday afternoon was particularly vicious. Rain lashed the Mercedes as Keisha navigated through flooded streets, trying to get Adrian to his quarterly board meeting on time. Duh, take Roosevelt, Adrian instructed, tension evident in his voice. We can't be late for this one. The lawsuit Richard Sterling had threatened was all over the business news, and Adrian had spent the morning fielding calls from nervous investors and board members. Keisha had watched him transform from the vulnerable man she'd seen by the lake into the steel-faced CEO the world expected him to be. Sir, Keisha said carefully, Roosevelt is completely flooded. I'm seeing cars stalled out. What if we... A massive flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed immediately by thunder that seemed to shake the car. The rain intensified, turning the afternoon dark as evening. How long until the meeting? Keisha asked. Adrian checked his phone. 15 minutes. I know another route, trust me. Their eyes met in the rear-view mirror, and Adrian nodded. Do it. Keisha took a series of turns that led them through less congested side streets. Her years driving ambulances through Chicago had taught her every shortcut, every back alley that could save precious minutes. They were making good time until a massive tree branch, weakened by the storm, crashed down directly in front of them. Keisha hit the brakes, and the car skidded to a stop just feet from the obstruction. Jesus, Adrian breathed. The branch completely blocked the narrow street, and behind them, other cars were already backing up. They were trapped. I can call a tow truck, Keisha offered, but even as she said it, she knew they'd never make the meeting. Adrian was already on his phone. James, yes, I can see the news coverage. No, we're not going to make it. A pause. Because there's a tree the size of a city bus blocking our path. He hung up and leaned back against the seat, closing his eyes. 3 months of preparation for this meeting. 3 months of building support to counter Sterling's accusations. And I'm going to miss it because of weather. The frustration in his voice was so raw that Keisha found herself turning around to face him fully. Can't you conference in? A conference call for a board meeting about a potential lawsuit. It would look like I'm avoiding them, hiding something. Adrian's laugh was bitter. Sterling will spin this as proof that I can't handle pressure. The storm continued to rage around them, and Keisha realized they might be stuck for hours. Other drivers had already abandoned their cars and were seeking shelter in nearby buildings. There's a coffee shop half a block up, Keisha observed. We could wait there until the storm passes and the street clears. Adrian looked at her incredulously. You want me to sit in a coffee shop during the most important board meeting of my career? I want you to take a breath and remember that you're human, Keisha said boldly. This storm isn't your fault. The tree isn't your fault. Sometimes life happens, and the best thing you can do is adapt. Something in her tone must have reached him, because Adrian's rigid posture relaxed slightly, spoken like someone who's dealt with actual emergencies. "I have," Keisha said simply. They made a run for the coffee shop, arriving soaked and breathless. It was a small, warm place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, the kind of neighborhood spot that Adrian had probably never noticed despite driving past it for years. "2 coffees, Adrian told the barista, then looked at Keisha. "What do you want?" "Oh, I'm fine. You're off duty until this storm passes," Adrian said firmly. "Coffee preferences?" "Vanilla latte." Small. They found a table by the window where they could watch the storm and monitor the street. Adrian had rolled up his sleeves and loosened his tie, looking more relaxed than Keisha had ever seen him. "When was the last time you sat in a place like this?" she asked. Adrian looked around, considering. "College. Maybe earlier. My father believed in maintaining certain standards." "What did he think of you taking over the company?" Adrian's expression grew complicated. "He wanted me to be exactly like him, ruthless, uncompromising, willing to do whatever it takes to win." He paused. "I'm not sure I am. Maybe that's not a bad thing. The board might disagree. Sterling certainly does." Keisha leaned forward. "What do you think your father would say about this lawsuit? That it was an inevitable cost of doing business? That having enemies means you're successful?" Adrian stirred his coffee absently. "But what if the enemies are right? What if he did cross lines that shouldn't be crossed?" "Then you fix it," Keisha said simply. "You do better. It's not that simple, isn't it? You inherited his company, not his sins. You get to choose what kind of leader you want to be." Adrian studied her face. "You make it sound easy." "I didn't say easy. I said simple. There's a difference." Outside, the storm was beginning to subside, but neither of them seemed eager to leave. In this small, warm space, they weren't CEO and driver. They were just 2 people talking. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said. Keisha's pulse quickened. "Sure. What's your story, really? You mentioned family obligations, but you seem like someone who could do anything she wanted." The question hit too close to home. Keisha felt the familiar panic of maintaining her cover story, but looking at Adrian's genuinely interested face, she found herself wanting to tell him something real. "My family means everything to me," she said carefully. "Sometimes that means making sacrifices, putting their needs before your own dreams." "What dreams did you sacrifice?" The question was so gentle, so genuinely curious, that Keisha almost told him the truth. About nursing school, about her job at the hospital, about the career she'd put on hold to save her father. Instead, she said, "It doesn't matter. Family comes first. It matters to me." The simple statement hung between them, and Keisha realized that Adrian Blackwood was looking at her like she was the most important person in the world. Like her dreams, her sacrifices, her choices mattered to him in a way that went far beyond their professional relationship. "Adrian, I know," he said quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know there are boundaries we shouldn't cross, but I can't pretend I don't feel this connection between us." Keisha's heart hammered against her ribs. "What connection?" Adrian leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The one that makes me look forward to these drives more than anything else in my day. The one that makes me ask James to book appointments across town just so I have more time with you. You've been doing that for the past week." Adrian's smile was rueful. Probably not the most efficient use of a CEO's time. Despite everything, the lies, the deception, the impossible situation, Keisha found herself smiling back. Probably not. The storm had passed, and through the window they could see city workers beginning to clear the fallen branch. Their stolen moment was ending. "We should go," Keisha said reluctantly. "Should," Adrian agreed, but neither of them moved. For one perfect moment, they sat in the warm coffee shop, looking at each other like the rest of the world didn't exist. Keisha memorized everything, the way Adrian's eyes crinkled when he almost smiled, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way he looked at her like she was worth looking at. Then reality crashed back. She was living a lie, and every moment she spent falling for Adrian made the inevitable reckoning more devastating. "The street's clear," she said, standing abruptly. Adrian followed her lead, but as they prepared to face the storm's aftermath, Keisha caught him watching her with an expression that made her chest tight with longing and guilt. She was falling in love with Adrian Blackwood, and it was going to destroy them both. The morning after the storm, Adrian made a request that changed everything. "I want you to drive me to the hospital," he said as they left his penthouse. "Chicago General, I'm making a surprise visit to announce a donation." Keisha's blood turned to ice. Chicago General was where she worked, where her colleagues knew her as Nurse Williams, not the mysterious driver for Adrian Blackwood. "And is there a particular entrance you'd prefer?" she managed, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Main entrance. I want this to be visible." As they drove through downtown Chicago, Keisha's mind raced. Carmen was working today. Dr. Rodriguez might be there. Any number of people who could recognize her and destroy her carefully constructed lie. "Actually," Adrian said suddenly, "let's go to the staff parking garage instead. I want to see how the hospital really operates, not the polished version they'll show me, if they know I'm coming." Keisha's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The staff garage was even worse. It's where she parked every day for her nursing shifts. "Sir, might I suggest—" "Adrian," he corrected automatically. "And no, I want to see the real hospital, the one that my donation will actually impact." There was no way out. Keisha guided the Mercedes into the familiar garage, parking in a visitor spot far from her usual space. She could only hope that luck would be on her side. It wasn't. "Keisha!" Carmen's voice rang out across the concrete garage. "Girl, what are you doing here on your day off?" Time slowed as Carmen approached the car, her bright smile faltering when she noticed the expensive vehicle and Keisha's professional driver attire. Adrian was already stepping out of the back seat, and Keisha watched in horror as Carmen's expression shifted from confusion to shock to dawning realization. Carmen started, looking between Keisha and Adrian. "I'm sorry, I thought you were someone else." But the damage was done. Adrian's sharp eyes had caught the interaction, the familiarity in Carmen's voice, the way she'd called Keisha by name with the casual intimacy of a close friend. "Carmen," Keisha said quickly, "this is Mr. Blackwood. I'm driving for him temporarily." Carmen, bless her, caught on quickly. "Oh, right. Sorry for the confusion. I work here. And I thought, well, you look like someone I know." Adrian's gaze moved between them, his expression unreadable. "The resemblance must be striking." "Very," Carmen agreed, but her voice sounded strained. "Well," Adrian said slowly, "shall we proceed with the tour?" The next hour was agony. Keisha followed Adrian through the hospital corridors, watching him interact with administrators and tour facilities where she'd worked countless shifts. Every moment, she expected someone else to recognize her, to call out her name, to expose the lie that was growing more complicated by the minute. Adrian seemed genuinely interested in the hospital's work, asking thoughtful questions about patient care and resource allocation. Watching him in this environment, Keisha saw a different side of him, compassionate, engaged, truly concerned about making a difference. "The pediatric wing needs the most help," Dr. Rodriguez explained as they walked past the children's ward. "We're understaffed and under-resourced." "What kind of staff shortages?" Adrian asked. "And the nurses, primarily. We've lost several good people to better-paying positions at private facilities." Keisha's chest tightened. She was one of those nurses who'd effectively abandoned her post, leaving her colleagues to cover her shifts while she played chauffeur to a billionaire. "What would it take to retain good nursing staff?" Adrian pressed. "Better pay, better hours, better support systems. These people work miracles every day, but they're burning out." As they completed the tour, Adrian handed Dr. Rodriguez a check that made the doctor's eyes widen. "This is for the pediatric wing, specifically for nursing support and equipment. Mr. Blackwood, this is incredibly generous." "It's an investment in the community," Adrian replied. "I hope it makes a real difference." On the drive back to his office, Adrian was unusually quiet. Keisha could feel his eyes on her in the rearview mirror, and her stomach churned with anxiety. Finally, he spoke. "Your friends seem to know you pretty well. Carmen, we've met a few times. Small world." Adrian's tone was neutral, but Keisha detected something underneath. Suspicion, curiosity. "She seemed surprised to see you in that particular context. I imagine she was surprised to see me working at all. I don't usually talk about my employment situation." Another long silence. Then, "Keisha, can I ask you something?" Her heart hammered. "Of course. Are you happy with this job? I mean, with driving for me?" The question was so unexpected that Keisha almost lost her composure entirely. "Why would you ask that?" "Because today, watching you in that hospital, you seemed different, more engaged, like you belonged there in a way you don't quite belong in this car." Keisha's throat tightened. Adrian was more perceptive than she'd given him credit for. "I care about healthcare, about helping people." "I could tell, which makes me wonder why you're driving for me instead of working in that field." The web of lies was becoming impossible to maintain. Every honest answer led to questions she couldn't answer. Every deflection made Adrian more suspicious. "Family obligations," she said again, hating how hollow it sounded. "Right, the uncle who needed a substitute driver." Something in his tone made Keisha's blood run cold. "Yes, Keisha, look at me." Reluctantly, she met his eyes in the rearview mirror. His expression was serious, almost sad. "I want you to know that whatever the real story is, whatever brought you into my life, I'm grateful for it. You've changed something in me these past weeks, made me remember who I wanted to be before I got caught up in expectations and legacies." Keisha's eyes filled with tears she couldn't let fall. "Adrian, I'm not asking you to tell me your secrets," he continued gently. "I'm just asking you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. Whatever it is, we can figure it out together." The kindness in his voice almost broke her. Here was a man offering her exactly what she wanted most: understanding, acceptance, partnership, and she couldn't take it without destroying everything. "Thank you," she whispered. That evening, Keisha sat in her father's hospital room, watching him sleep peacefully. His color was better, his breathing easier. The new medication regimen was working, funded by the job she'd obtained through deception. "You look troubled, baby girl," Marcus said, opening his eyes. "And Dad, how are you feeling?" "Better, much better. The doctors say I might be able to come home next week." He studied her face. "But you don't look happy about that." Keisha slumped in the visitor's chair. "It's complicated. Adrian Blackwood complicated." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "He's a good man, Keisha. Demanding, yes. Particular about his routines. But he's fair, and he treats his people well. Better than his father did. That's not the problem." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You care about him." It wasn't a question. Keisha buried her face in her hands. "I never meant for this to happen. I was just supposed to drive him around until you got better, keep my head down, do the job, collect the paycheck. But he's not what I expected. He's kind and funny and lonely and—" She looked up at her father. And I think he's falling for me too." Marcus's expression grew troubled. "Keisha, you know this can't—" "I know," she said sharply, then lowered her voice. "I know it can't last. I know that when he finds out the truth, he'll never forgive me. I know that I'm living a lie and that every day I don't tell him makes it worse." "Then tell him." "Tell him what? That I lied about who I am. That I'm not his driver. I'm a nurse who abandoned her patients to save her father. That every conversation we've had has been built on deception. Tell him that you're a daughter who loves her father enough to sacrifice everything for him. Tell him that you're a nurse who cares so much about people that you couldn't bear to let someone die for lack of money. Tell him the truth, Keisha, all of it. He'll hate me, maybe. Or maybe he'll understand that good people sometimes have to make impossible choices." Keisha wanted to believe that, but the fear was too strong. She'd seen Adrian's reaction to betrayal, his deep-seated mistrust of people who had hidden agendas, How could she expect him to forgive a lie this fundamental? Her phone buzzed with a text message from Adrian. "Thank you for today, for showing me the hospital, for helping me see what really matters. I hope your uncle is feeling better." Keisha stared at the message, her heart breaking. Even in his gratitude, he was thinking of her fictional uncle, concerned about her fake family crisis. Another message followed. "I know this is unprofessional, but would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow? Not as employee and employer, just as us." "Dad," Keisha whispered, showing him the messages. Marcus read them and sighed deeply. "Oh, baby girl. You're in love with him. It doesn't matter. It can't matter. It's the only thing that matters." That night, Keisha lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Adrian's invitation burning in her mind. Every instinct told her to decline, to maintain what was left of her professional distance. But another part of her, the part that had been starved for connection, for someone who saw her as more than just a caregiver or a paycheck, whispered that maybe, just maybe, she deserved one perfect evening before her world came crashing down. At 2 a.m., she picked up her phone and typed, "I'd like that very much." She hit send before she could change her mind, sealing her fate with 6 little words. Keisha changed clothes 4 times before settling on a simple black dress she'd borrowed from Carmen. It was elegant without being flashy, professional but feminine. The kind of dress a woman might wear to dinner with a man she cared about but wasn't supposed to want. Adrian had chosen a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park, far from the downtown power lunch spots where he might be recognized. When Keisha arrived, he was already waiting at a corner table, having traded his usual business suit for dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that made his green eyes even more striking. He stood when he saw her, and the way his face lit up made her heart skip several beats. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. You look—" She paused, taking in his relaxed appearance. "Different. Good different. No tie, no board meetings, no crisis management. Just dinner with someone I've been wanting to get to know better." The waiter seated them at a table illuminated by candlelight, and for a moment, Keisha allowed herself to pretend this was real. That she was just a woman having dinner with a man who made her pulse race. No lies between them, no secrets waiting to destroy everything. "I have to confess something," Adrian said as they looked over the menu. Keisha's stomach clenched. What's that?" "I've never done this before, asked an employee to dinner. I mean, it goes against every professional principle I was raised with." "Then why did you ask?" Adrian set down his menu and looked directly at her. "Because these past few weeks, you've become the best part of my day. Because I've never met anyone who challenges me to be better without making me feel inadequate. Because when I'm with you, I remember who I wanted to be before the world told me who I had to be." The honesty in his voice made Keisha's chest tight with emotion. "Adrian, I know this is complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why we shouldn't be here, but I couldn't let another day pass without telling you how I feel." "How do you feel?" Adrian reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The contact sent warmth shooting up her arm. "Like I'm falling for my driver, which is either the best thing that's happened to me in years or the worst professional decision I've ever made." Despite everything, Keisha laughed. "Probably both. Definitely both." Adrian's thumb traced across her knuckles. "What about you? How do you feel?" It was the moment of truth. Keisha could deflect, could maintain her professional distance, could protect them both from the inevitable heartbreak. Instead, she found herself saying, terrified, "Of me, of this, of how much I want it to be real." Something shifted in Adrian's expression. "It is real, Keisha. Whatever else is complicated about our situation, this," he squeezed her hand, "this is real." They ordered wine and talked about everything except their professional relationship. Adrian told her about growing up in his father's shadow, about the pressure to be perfect, about his secret dream of running a non-profit instead of a corporation. Keisha shared carefully edited stories about her childhood, her love of helping people, her close relationship with her father. You talk about your family like they're your whole world, Adrian observed. They are. When my mother died, it was just me and my dad. We took care of each other. Your mother died. I'm sorry. You never mentioned... Keisha realized she'd slipped, revealing a truth that didn't fit her cover story. It was a long time ago. How old were you? 16. Adrian's expression softened. That's when you learned to take care of people. I guess so. Is that why you went into emergency medicine? To save people the way you couldn't save her? The question hit so close to home that Keisha had to look away. Something like that. They were interrupted by the arrival of their entrees, but Adrian's perceptive observation lingered. He was getting too close to the truth, seeing too clearly through her carefully constructed walls. After dinner, they walked through Lincoln Park, the autumn air crisp around them. When they reached the zoo, Adrian stopped at the fence overlooking the pond. I used to come here as a kid, he said. When the pressure at home got too intense, I'd sneak out and sit by this pond for hours. What kind of pressure? The usual billionaire heir problems, Adrian said with self-deprecating humor. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect preparation for taking over the family empire. No room for mistakes or weaknesses or just being a kid. That sounds lonely. It was, until recently. He turned to face her. You've changed that, Keisha. For the first time in my life, I don't feel alone. The vulnerability in his voice undid her. Before she could stop herself, Keisha reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You're not alone, she whispered. Adrian's hand covered hers, pressing her palm against his cheek. Promise me something. What? Promise me that whatever happens, with work, with the lawsuit, with all the complications we can't control, you won't disappear, that you'll give us a chance to figure this out. Keisha's throat closed. He was asking for the one thing she couldn't promise, the one assurance she couldn't give. In a few days, when her father was released from the hospital, when he could return to work, she would disappear from Adrian's life as suddenly as she'd entered it. Adrian, I know it's asking a lot. I know I have no right to ask you to complicate your life for me, but I've never felt this way about anyone, and I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose you. Standing in the soft glow of the park lights, with Adrian looking at her like she held his entire future in her hands, Keisha made a decision that would haunt her forever. I promise, she lied. Adrian's smile was radiant. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to maintain their professional boundaries, to save them both from this beautiful mistake. Instead, Keisha rose on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was everything she'd imagined and more, tender and desperate, sweet and devastating. Adrian's arms circled her waist, pulling her closer, and for one perfect moment, the world consisted only of this, his lips on hers, his heartbeat against her chest, the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he whispered. I know. Are you okay with that? Keisha looked into his green eyes, memorizing every fleck of gold, every line of concern, every detail of the man she was falling in love with and would inevitably lose. Yes, she said, adding another lie to the collection that would eventually destroy them both. But as Adrian walked her back to her car, his hand warm in hers, Keisha decided that some lies were worth telling. If she could give him one perfect evening, one moment of connection and happiness before reality tore them apart, then maybe the heartbreak would be worth it, for both of them. As she drove home that night, Keisha's lips still tingling from Adrian's kiss, she caught sight of herself in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her was glowing, transformed by love and hope and the promise of something beautiful. It was the last time she would see herself that way. Because tomorrow, everything would begin to fall apart. James Morrison prided himself on protecting Adrian Blackwood from threats, both professional and personal. So when his boss started arriving late to meetings, smiling at random moments and humming in elevators, James knew something was seriously wrong. The first red flag had been the prolonged drives. Adrian, who usually demanded the most efficient routes, was now taking scenic detours and requesting stops at coffee shops. The second red flag was the new driver herself, beautiful, intelligent, and far too engaging for someone whose job was simply to operate a vehicle. The final red flag came when James tried to run a standard background check on Keisha Williams and discovered that her employment history had some peculiar gaps. "Sir," James said, entering Adrian's office with a manila folder, "we need to talk." Adrian looked up from his computer, still wearing the slightly dazed expression he'd had since his dinner with Keisha 2 nights ago. "What is it, James?" "It's about your driver. I think you should see this." Adrian's expression immediately sharpened. "What about her?" James placed the folder on Adrian's desk. "And I ran a routine background check, standard procedure for anyone who has regular access to you. Miss Williams' story doesn't quite add up." "What do you mean?" "According to her employment records, she worked as an EMT 5 years ago, but there's no record of her driving professionally since then. No transportation company has her on their payroll, no references from previous driving positions." Adrian's jaw tightened. Maybe she was working independently. Maybe. But here's the interesting part. She's currently listed as employed full-time at Chicago General Hospital as a nurse. The words hit Adrian like a physical blow. That's impossible. Nursing license, active employment status, colleagues who know her well, including the woman who approached your car in the hospital parking garage. James placed a photograph on the desk. Carmen Rodriguez, ICU nurse. According to hospital records, she and Keisha Williams have worked together for 3 years. Adrian stared at the photo, his mind reeling. The casual familiarity in Carmen's voice, Keisha's detailed knowledge of medical procedures, the way she'd seemed so at home in the hospital corridors, it all made devastating sense. "There's more," James continued grimly. "Marcus Williams, your regular driver. He's not her uncle, he's her father. And he's currently a patient at Chicago General, being treated for diabetes-related complications." The betrayal hit Adrian in waves. The woman he'd been falling in love with, the woman he'd trusted with his most vulnerable moments, had been lying to him from the beginning. "Sir?" James's voice seemed to come from far away. "What would you like me to do?" Adrian closed the folder with deliberate calm, though his hands were shaking. "Nothing. Don't do anything." "Sir, she's clearly been deceiving you. We should nothing," Adrian said sharply. "I'll handle this myself." After James left, Adrian sat alone in his office, staring out at the Chicago skyline. Everything about their relationship suddenly made horrible sense. Her knowledge of medical procedures, her empathy with his anxiety attacks, the way she'd looked at the hospital like she belonged there. Because she did belong there. She was a nurse, not a driver, a daughter, not a niece, a woman who had constructed an elaborate lie to, what? Get close to him? Extract information? Play some kind of long con? The questions tormented him, but underneath the anger and betrayal, a worse realization was growing. He was still in love with her. Even knowing she'd lied about everything, even understanding that their entire relationship was built on deception, he couldn't stop the ache in his chest when he thought about losing her. His phone buzzed with a text from Keisha. "Looking forward to seeing you this morning. Hope you're having a good day so far." Adrian stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I need to make an unexpected stop today. Chicago General Hospital. Personal business." Her response came quickly. "Of course, whatever you need." The irony was almost unbearable. She was agreeing to drive him to her own workplace, where her deception would finally be exposed. Either she was incredibly confident in her ability to maintain the lie, or she had no idea that he knew the truth. An hour later, Keisha arrived at his building with her usual professional smile. "Good morning." she said, as he slipped into the back seat. "My good morning." Adrian's voice sounded strange to his own ears. "How's your uncle doing?" "Better, thank you. The doctors think he might be able to return to work soon." Another lie, delivered with the same gentle concern she'd always shown. Adrian wondered how many other lies she'd told him, how much of their relationship had been real versus calculated manipulation. "That's good news," he managed. As they drove toward the hospital, Adrian studied Keisha in the rearview mirror. She looked the same, beautiful, composed, occasionally catching his eye with a small smile that made his heart skip despite everything. If he hadn't seen the evidence himself, he never would have suspected the depth of her deception. "Adrian," she said suddenly, "are you okay? You seem distant today." The concern in her voice sounded genuine, which only made everything worse. "Just thinking about business, the lawsuit, among other things." They drove the rest of the way in silence, and Adrian watched Keisha navigate the hospital campus with the familiarity of someone who'd done it thousands of times. She parked in a visitor spot, but Adrian noticed how her eyes automatically went to the staff parking area, where a small blue Honda sat in a space marked K. Williams. "How long do you think you'll be?" she asked. "I'm not sure." "This meeting might take a while. I'll wait in the car." Adrian paused with his hand on the door handle. "Actually, I'd like you to come with me." Keisha's face went pale. "I don't think that's appropriate. This is personal business." "I insist." Adrian's tone left no room for argument. "I might need to leave quickly, and I want you nearby." He could see the panic in her eyes, quickly masked by professional compliance. "And of course, sir." They walked through the hospital corridors together, and Adrian watched Keisha's careful performance. She kept her head down, avoided eye contact with staff members, tried to make herself invisible, but it was too late. "Keisha!" Dr. Rodriguez appeared around a corner, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "What are you doing here? I thought you were taking extended leave for family reasons." The game was over. Adrian watched Keisha's face crumble as she realized there was no way to explain this, no lie that could cover the massive deception she'd been living. "Dr. Rodriguez," she said weakly. This is Mr. Blackwood." Dr. Rodriguez looked between them, confusion evident. "Mr. Blackwood, the donor, but I thought, didn't you say you were caring for your father?" "She is caring for her father," Adrian said quietly. "Marcus Williams." "Your patient?" Understanding dawned in Dr. Rodriguez's eyes, followed quickly by sympathy. Oh, I see." "Yes," Adrian said, his voice carefully controlled. "I think we all see now." Keisha looked at Adrian with tears in her eyes. "Adrian, please, let me explain." "Not here," he said firmly. "We'll discuss this in private." The drive back to Adrian's building was the longest of Keisha's life. Adrian sat in complete silence, staring out the window, his face a mask of cold fury that was somehow worse than shouting would have been. When they reached his building, he spoke for the first time in 20 minutes. "My office, now." Keisha followed him into the elevator, her heart breaking with every floor they climbed. She'd known this moment would come eventually, but she hadn't expected it to hurt this much. She hadn't expected to see such profound betrayal in Adrian's eyes, or to realize that losing his trust hurt worse than losing the job ever could. The elevator doors opened, and Adrian walked ahead of her without looking back. As they entered his office, Keisha caught sight of the manila folder on his desk and realized that her time had run out in more ways than one. It was time to face the consequences of her beautiful, necessary, devastating lie. Adrian closed his office door with deliberate care, the soft click echoing like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Keisha stood near his desk, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, watching him with eyes that held equal parts fear and resignation. "Sit down," Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. "Adrian, please, let me sit down." Keisha sank into the chair across from his desk, and Adrian took his time walking around to face her. He picked up the manila folder James had left, weighing it in his hands, like evidence in a trial. 3 weeks, he said finally. 3 weeks of lies. Not everything was a lie. No, Adrian opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. Keisha Williams, registered nurse, Chicago General Hospital, full-time employment status. He placed it on the desk between them. Not a part-time driver, not Marcus's niece, not someone who occasionally worked EMT shifts. Keisha's face crumpled. Adrian, a daughter. He pulled out another document. Marcus Williams, your father, not your uncle. Admitted to Chicago General 6 weeks ago for diabetic complications. His voice grew harder with each revelation. The same hospital where you work. The same hospital where your friend Carmen was so surprised to see you playing chauffeur to a billionaire. Please, let me explain. Explain what? How you constructed an elaborate deception to get close to me. How you played on my loneliness and my trust to... What exactly? What was the end game here, Keisha? The accusation hit her like a slap. You think I was playing you? What else am I supposed to think? You lied about your name, your job, your relationship to my employee. You lied about your entire life. I lied about the details, not about who I am. The details? Adrian's control finally cracked. The details are everything. They're the foundation of trust, of knowing someone, of... He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. Jesus, Keisha, I told you things I've never told anyone. I opened my life to you, and it was all built on lies. Keisha stood up, tears streaming down her face. The feelings weren't lies. What happened between us? What we shared? None of that was fake. How can you even say that? How can you expect me to believe anything you say now? Because you know me. You know who I am, Adrian. You've seen my heart, my soul. The job doesn't define me. And neither does my relationship to Marcus, doesn't it? Adrian moved closer, his green eyes blazing with hurt and anger. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like everything I thought I knew about you was carefully crafted fiction. I'm a nurse, Keisha shouted, her own emotions finally breaking free. I save lives for a living. I work double shifts to help people. And when my father, not my uncle, got sick, I did what I had to do to save him too. Yes, I lied about the details, but I never lied about caring about you. Your father? Adrian's voice was bitter. The man who's been driving me around for 15 years, who never once mentioned he had a daughter working at the hospital I donate to, because he was protecting me, because he knew that if you found out I was sacrificing my career to save his life, you'd feel obligated to help, and he couldn't live with that kind of charity. So instead, you both decided to lie to me. We decided to handle our family crisis ourselves, without burdening you with our problems. Adrian laughed harshly. Burdening me, Keisha. I would have paid for his treatment without question. I would have given him time off, connected him with the best doctors, done whatever it took. Instead, you chose deception. And what would that have made me? Your employee's daughter who you felt sorry for, your charity case. Keisha wiped her eyes, her voice growing stronger. I didn't want your pity, Adrian. I wanted to earn the money my father needed, by lying to me every single day, by doing a job I was qualified for and doing it well, while pretending to be someone you weren't, while being exactly who I am, someone who loves her family enough to sacrifice anything for them. They stared at each other across the office, both breathing hard, both wounded by the confrontation neither had wanted. The dinner, Adrian said suddenly, the kiss, all of it, was any of it real for you? Keisha's voice broke. It was the most real thing in my life. Then why didn't you tell me the truth? If what we had was real, why didn't you trust me enough to be honest? Because I was scared. The admission came out as a sob, because I was falling in love with you, and I knew that when you found out the truth, you'd never forgive me. Because I'm not some mysterious, fascinating woman. I'm just a nurse who was desperate to save her father. Just a nurse. Adrian's anger faltered. Keisha, you're not just anything. You're brilliant and compassionate and strong. You handle crises with grace. You see through people's defenses. You make me want to be better than I am. Do you really think I'd care less about you because you save lives for a living instead of driving cars? Yes, she whispered. Diet because that's what everyone cares about, status, connections, what you can do for them, not me. No. Then why are you so angry about the job? Why does it matter that I'm a nurse instead of a driver? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. It doesn't matter that you're a nurse. It matters that you didn't trust me enough to tell me. It matters that you let me fall in love with a lie. I'm not a lie, Keisha said fiercely. Everything I showed you, everything I gave you, that was real. The only lie was about how I ended up in your car. The only lie, Keisha, you created an entire fictional relationship to Marcus. You pretended to be someone with no medical training when you're actually qualified to save lives. You let me believe you were available when you're actually abandoning your real career to play chauffeur. I was available. I took leave from the hospital to do this job. Why? The question came out like a plea. Why didn't you just ask for help? Why didn't Marcus just explain the situation? Keisha looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but steady, because when you've spent your whole life taking care of yourself, asking for help feels like admitting failure. Because my father is proud, and he'd rather die than feel like a burden. Because I've never had anyone I could depend on except myself, and trusting someone else with something that important. It was terrifying. Even me. Especially you. She turned back to face him. Because you were becoming everything to me, and I couldn't bear the thought of you looking at me like a problem to be solved instead of a woman worth loving. Adrian sat down heavily in his chair. God, Keisha, do you really think so little of me? I think the world of you. That's why I was so scared to lose you. You've lost me anyway. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Keisha felt something inside her break completely. I know, she said simply. I know I have. They sat in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Finally, Adrian spoke. I need time to think, to process all of this. Of course. Marcus can return to work as soon as he's medically cleared. You can go back to your life at the hospital. Adrian, please. His voice was exhausted. Just please go. Keisha stood on unsteady legs. At the door, she turned back one last time. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I hurt you. And I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to trust you with the truth from the beginning. Adrian didn't look up from his desk. So am I. As Keisha walked out of his office, she knew she was leaving behind more than just a job. She was leaving behind the man she loved, the future she dared to dream about, and the best part of herself. The elevator doors closed, and Keisha finally allowed herself to break down completely, sobbing for everything she'd gained and lost in the space of 3 weeks. Outside Adrian's office, the Chicago sun continued to shine, indifferent to the hearts breaking 30 floors below. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation in Adrian's office, and they felt like the longest days of Keisha's life. She'd thrown herself back into nursing with desperate intensity, working double shifts and volunteering for the most challenging cases, trying to lose herself in the familiar rhythm of saving lives. It wasn't working. Every morning at 6:45, she found herself looking toward the hospital parking garage entrance, half expecting to see Adrian's Mercedes. Every time Carmen asked how she was doing, Keisha forced a smile and pretended her heart wasn't breaking. And every time her father called to check on her, she had to swallow the tears that threatened to spill. "You're killing yourself with these hours," Carmen said, cornering Keisha in the break room after her third consecutive 12-hour shift. "When was the last time you actually went home?" "I sleep," Keisha protested weakly. "You survive. There's a difference." Carmen's voice was gentle, but firm. "What happened with Adrian is over," Keisha interrupted. "He made his choice. I made mine." Before Carmen could respond, the trauma bay alarm screamed through the hospital. Both women immediately switched into professional mode, rushing toward the emergency department. "Multi-vehicle accident on Lakeshore Drive," the paramedic reported as the ambulance doors burst open. "A 68-year-old male, massive chest trauma, possible internal bleeding." Keisha's hands moved automatically, as they transferred the patient to the trauma bed. But when they cut away his blood-soaked clothing, her breath caught. The man's face, though swollen and bruised, was devastatingly familiar. "Marcus Williams, according to his license," the EMT called out. The world tilted. Keisha stared down at her father's battered form, her professional composure cracking as the full horror hit her. This wasn't just another patient. This was the man who'd raised her, who'd been her anchor through every storm. "Keisha!" Dr. Rodriguez's sharp voice cut through her paralysis. "Can you handle this?" She looked at her father's pale face, at the monitors showing weakening vital signs, and felt something fierce settle in her chest. "I can handle it." For the next hour, Keisha worked with mechanical precision, her hands steady even as her heart threatened to shatter. She started IVs, monitored vitals, anticipated Dr. Rodriguez's every move as they fought to stabilize Marcus. "We need surgery," Dr. Rodriguez announced after reviewing scans. Significant internal bleeding, his pressures dropping fast. As they prepped Marcus for transport, Keisha noticed his personal effects on the counter. His phone was buzzing insistently with an incoming call. The name on the screen made her heart stop. Adrian Blackwood. Without thinking, she answered, "Marcus." Adrian's voice was sharp with concern. "Thank God. You were supposed to pick me up an hour ago." "Adrian!" Keisha's voice came out as barely a whisper. The silence was deafening. Then, "Keisha, why are you answering Marcus's phone? He's been in an accident. He's hurt badly." "What hospital?" "Chicago General, but you don't need to." "I'm on my way." The line went dead. Part of Keisha wanted to call back, to tell him not to come. But a larger part, the part that was terrified and desperately needed someone to lean on, was grateful he was coming. 2 hours passed in agonizing waiting. Keisha sat in the surgical waiting room, still in blood-stained scrubs, watching the clock. She was trying to scrub her father's blood from under her fingernails when familiar footsteps approached. Adrian stood in the doorway, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, green eyes wild with worry. "How is he?" he asked without preamble. "In surgery. Dr. Patterson's operating, you say? But the damage was extensive. Internal bleeding, possible brain injury." Keisha's voice broke. "It's touch and go." Adrian sat beside her, maintaining careful distance but close enough that she could feel his presence. For a moment, they sat in silence, their shared concern for Marcus overshadowing the painful history between them. "This isn't your fault," Keisha said quietly when Adrian started to blame himself for the timing. "Whatever happened between us," Adrian said suddenly, "whatever anger I've been carrying, none of that matters now. Marcus's family to me has been for 15 years, and that means your family too." The unexpected kindness broke something loose in Keisha's chest. Tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over, and she found herself sobbing with raw, exhausted grief. Without hesitation, Adrian pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent, safety and comfort she'd been denying herself for weeks. "He's gonna be okay," Adrian whispered against her hair. "Marcus is tough. He's a fighter." "I can't lose him," Keisha sobbed. "He's all I have." "You're not alone," Adrian said firmly. "Even if the worst happened, you have people who care about you." Keisha pulled back to search his face, looking for anger or betrayal. Instead, she found only concern and something that looked like love. "Do I?" she asked softly. "After everything I did." Adrian's hands framed her face, thumbs wiping away tears. "You have me," he said simply. "You've always had me, even when I was too hurt to admit it." Before Keisha could respond, Dr. Patterson appeared in surgical scrubs, smiling. "He's going to be fine," he announced. "We repaired the bleeding and removed pressure from his brain. He's stable, conscious, and asking for his daughter." Relief nearly buckled Keisha's knees. Adrian's arm came around her waist, steadying her. In Marcus's room, her father was awake but groggy, head wrapped in bandages. His eyes were clear when they found Keisha. "There's my baby girl," he said hoarsely. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Dad." Keisha took his hand carefully. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." His gaze shifted to Adrian. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," Adrian said, moving closer. "Don't I need you two to stop looking at each other like strangers?" Marcus said bluntly. "Life's too short for pride and too unpredictable for wasted time." "Some things never change," Adrian said with affection. "I almost died today," Marcus said seriously. "You know what I was thinking about? How I'd failed you both, how my pride created a situation where two people I love were miserable because they were too stubborn to forgive each other." "Dad," Keisha started. "Let me finish. What matters is that life is precious and unpredictable. If you have the chance to love someone who loves you back, you take it. You don't waste time on wounded pride." The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of monitors. Keisha looked at Adrian, seeing her own emotions reflected in his face. Love, fear, hope. "He's right," Adrian said quietly. "I've spent 2 weeks being angry, and all it's done is make me miserable. I don't want to waste any more time." "Neither do I," Keisha whispered. Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. "Good. Now get out of here and talk properly. I need rest, and you two need to figure out how to be happy again." In the hospital corridor, Adrian took Keisha's hand and led her to a quiet alcove. "I'm sorry," Keisha said first, "for lying, for not trusting you, for hurting you." "I'm sorry too," Adrian replied, "and for shutting you out, for not fighting for us. Where do we go from here? We start over, honestly this time, completely honestly." "That's terrifying. The best things usually are." She studied his face and saw the man she'd fallen in love with during those morning drives. "Adrian Blackwood," she said formally, extending her hand. "I'm Keisha Williams. I'm a trauma nurse. Marcus is my father, and I'm in love with you despite every reason I shouldn't be." Adrian brought her hand to his lips. "Keisha Williams. I'm Adrian Blackwood. I'm a CEO who just realized some things are more important than being right. And I'm in love with you too." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. It tasted like forgiveness and second chances, like the promise of something real built on truth instead of fiction. "What happens now?" Keisha asked. "Now we take it one day at a time. We learn to trust each other completely." "I'd like that." "Good, because I never did find a replacement driver I liked," Keisha laughed, her first genuine laugh in weeks. "I might know someone. Fair warning, she takes scenic routes." "Perfect," Adrian said, pulling her close. "And I've discovered I love scenic routes." 1 year later, the morning of her wedding, Keisha woke in her childhood bedroom to gentle rain against the windows. For a moment, panic fluttered. She dreamed of an outdoor ceremony in Lincoln Park. Then she heard laughter downstairs and remembered Adrian's words from the night before. "Our best moments happened in unexpected weather." Rain just means another beautiful story. "Keisha Marie Williams," Carmen's voice carried upstairs, "your dress won't put itself on." Keisha padded downstairs in silk pajamas, finding her apartment transformed. White flowers filled every surface. Her wedding dress hung like a promise, and Carmen was arranging makeup supplies with military precision. "Morning beautiful," Carmen said, hugging her tight. "Ready to become Mrs. Blackwood." "Mrs. Williams Blackwood," Keisha corrected. "We're hyphenating." "Of course you are. Only you two would make even your name complicated." Carmen guided her to a chair. "How are you feeling?" Keisha considered the question. The past year had been a journey of rediscovery. They'd done couples therapy, Adrian's suggestion, working through trust issues and communication patterns. They'd learned to fight productively, share fears honestly, and support each other's dreams without losing themselves. "Perfect," she said finally. "I feel perfect." As Carmen worked on her hair, Keisha's mind wandered to everything that had led here. Adrian had stepped back from some business commitments, creating space for their relationship. She'd been promoted to senior trauma nurse and started a mentorship program, funded by Blackwood Industries. Naturally, they'd bought a brownstone in Lincoln Park 6 months ago, close to both hospital and office. It had a garden where they grew vegetables with Marcus's advice, a study for Adrian's home office, and a kitchen big enough for the family dinners they hosted every Sunday. "Earth to bride," Carmen said, applying foundation. "Where did you go?" "Just thinking about how we got here." "All good thoughts. The best," Keisha smiled. Though I'm still amazed Adrian let Dad officiate. After everything Marcus went through, after he brought you two back together, Adrian wouldn't have it any other way. Marcus had made a full recovery, though the experience changed him. He was more direct about emotions now, more willing to share feelings instead of keeping them locked away. It was Marcus who'd suggested becoming ordained online to perform their ceremony, spending weeks crafting a service reflecting their unique journey. A knock interrupted them. "Can I come in?" Marcus's voice called. "I have something for the bride." Marcus entered wearing his best suit, carrying a small velvet box. He looked distinguished and healthy, only a small scar above his eyebrow remaining from the accident. "Your mother's pearls," he said, revealing lustrous cream-colored pearls. "She wore them on our wedding day. Always said they'd be yours when you found the right man." Keisha's eyes filled as Marcus fastened the necklace. The pearls felt warm, like a blessing from the mother she still missed daily. "She would have loved Adrian," Keisha said softly. "She would have loved seeing you this happy," Marcus corrected, voice thick with emotion. "Though she'd have had words about you lying to that poor man for 3 weeks. "Dad!" Keisha protested, laughing. "Your mother never beat around the bush. She'd have marched you to his office day one." Carmen finished the makeup and stepped back. Time for the dress. The gown was perfect, classic A-line with delicate lace sleeves, flowing skirt that made Keisha feel like herself elevated. As they helped her into it, fastening each button carefully, Keisha caught sight of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the radiant woman looking back. "Beautiful baby girl," Marcus said, pride and tears thick in his voice. Another knock announced James Morrison. "The cars are here. Mr. Blackwood wanted you to have this." He handed Keisha an envelope with Adrian's careful script. Inside, "My dearest Keisha, 1 year ago, you taught me that love requires courage, to be vulnerable, to forgive, to trust again. Today, I promise to love you honestly for the rest of our lives. I can't wait to see you walk down that aisle. But I'm more excited about all our adventures afterward. All my love, Adrian P.S. The sun's shining now, but I brought an umbrella. Our best memories are made in unexpected weather." Keisha looked outside. The morning rain had given way to brilliant sunshine, perfect October weather that made Chicago look like a postcard. "Ready?" Carmen asked, adjusting the veil. The drive to Lincoln Park was surreal. The city looked more vibrant, as if celebrating with them. At the ceremony site, Keisha gasped. The space was transformed with white chairs and abundant flowers, creating an intimate outdoor cathedral. But what took her breath away was Adrian waiting at the altar, devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, looking at her like she was the answer to every prayer. The ceremony was small, just family and friends who'd become family. Dr. Rodriguez beamed with pride. Carmen stood as maid of honor, radiant in her role. James served as best man, having proven himself through loyalty during difficult times. As the string quartet began, not traditional wedding march, but the jazz standard from the coffee shop where they'd fallen in love again, Keisha took Marcus's arm. Adrian's face when he saw her made every tear, every sleepless night worth it. He was crying openly, his entire being focused on her with intensity that made her feel precious beyond measure. The walk felt like eternity, and instant simultaneously. At the altar, Marcus placed Keisha's hand in Adrian's. "Take care of each other," he said simply. "Dearly beloved," Marcus began as efficient, "we're here to witness something extraordinary, not just marriage, but celebration of love that survived deception and forgiveness, pride and humility, separation and reunion." The ceremony was perfect in its imperfection. Adrian stumbled over vows, voice breaking as he promised to love her, through scenic routes and traffic jams, hospital emergencies and board meetings. Keisha cried during hers, mascara running despite Carmen's waterproof promises. When the ring bearer, Dr. Rodriguez's grandson, dropped the rings, sending everyone scrambling, the moment became exactly the imperfect perfection defining their relationship. By power vested in me by Illinois and an online course I completed last month, Marcus announced with pride, I pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss was everything, tender and passionate, familiar and new, full of promise for days to come. Mr. and Mrs. Adrian Blackwood Williams, Marcus declared. At the reception, Adrian's toast had Keisha reaching for tissues. 2 years ago, I thought I knew what I wanted: control, predictability, success measured in quarterly reports. He looked at Keisha with infinite love. Then I hired a driver who changed everything. She taught me that beautiful things come from unexpected places, that love isn't finding someone perfect, it's finding someone whose imperfections fit yours perfectly. Later, on the restaurant terrace overlooking Chicago, they marveled at how far they'd come. Any regrets? Adrian asked. Just one, that it took so long to get here. I think we needed the complicated beginning. It taught us to fight for each other. What comes next? Everything, Adrian said simply. The family we want, the dreams we've shared, the ones we haven't imagined yet. I love you, Adrian Blackwood Williams. I love you too, Keisha Blackwood Williams. As they headed home to their brownstone, officially theirs together, Keisha reflected on the journey. She'd started trying to save her father's life and ended up saving her own. Love wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real, choosing each other again and again. Some love stories, she thought as sleep claimed her in Adrian's arms, were worth every detour to find them. Some scenic routes led exactly where you belonged. The end. Thanks for watching to the end. Did you like the story? Tell us what you thought in the comments below. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe now for more exciting stories you won't want to miss. Activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. See you in the next story. See you there.